Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we have a really fantastic explainer lined up for you, and we're diving deep into Chapter 6, Criminal Justice Policy. We're going to set a pretty enthusiastic pace today because we are demystifying how the actual rules of the justice system are made, applied, and evaluated. I mean, if you've ever wondered how the day-to-day operations of the police, the courts, and corrections are actually structured, well, it all comes down to policy. So let's get ready to understand the real mechanics of the system. Before we get into the weeds, though, I want to hook you with a question that plagues scholars and citizens alike. Why do so many seemingly good criminal justice policies fail? It's a fascinating question, right? We look around society and we see a lot of broken systems. Far too often we see policies implemented as knee-jerk reactions to a current event or some kind of public panic, and they completely bypass the crucial interplay of theory and data. When we rely on public polls or snap judgments instead of rigorous research, those policies are pretty much doomed to break down from the start. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our agenda for this explainer, so you know exactly what core concepts you'll master. 1. Defining criminal justice policy. 2. The policy development cycle. 3. Theory, evidence, and policy. 4. Why program fidelity matters. 5. Evidence-based solutions. And 6. Key themes and questions. First up, Section 1, Defining Criminal Justice Policy. Before we can evaluate a policy or figure out why one fails, we really need to understand what we actually mean when we throw the word policy around in both an academic and a practical sense. Basically, criminal justice policy consists of the laws and practices that provide rules and guidance to criminal justice officials. And crucially, it's absolutely vital for managing high levels of discretion out in the field. Policy is what dictates the moment-to-moment actions of police, courts, and corrections. It is the framework regulating action on the ground. It determines exactly when an officer can use force, when they can make an arrest, or how a probation officer manages their caseload. Without policy, the whole system would rely purely on individual whim, which is exactly why having structured, clear rules is absolutely essential. Moving right along to Section 2, the policy development cycle. Let's move to the next stage and see how this builds. We're looking at the chronological life cycle of how an idea floating around in society actually becomes a concrete, fully implemented policy. It happens in 5 sequential stages. First, we have to start by identifying the problem. Basically, what isn't operating properly? Once citizens, the media, or advocacy groups identify a problem, we move to agenda formation. This is where demands are heavily debated and the actual intent of the policy is put forward. Third is policy adoption, so the passage of new laws or executive orders. Then comes a genuinely tricky stage, implementation. This is often all about spending the money and getting resources to the right places. And finally, we absolutely must have evaluation to see if the policy actually worked. So policy development is an ongoing cycle. It's definitely not just a one-and-done event. Next is Section 3, Theory, Evidence, and Policy. Now, we really have to understand the political and academic forces that heavily shape those development stages we just walked through. Policies don't just magically appear out of thin air, right? Policy development is heavily influenced by political demands. On one side, the liberal perspective tends to focus on due process, individual freedoms, solving societal inequality, and taking a rehabilitative approach to crime. Conversely, the conservative perspective focuses on a law and order philosophy, retributive values, and rational choice deterrence, which is essentially an eye for an eye mindset. Now, we are impartially reporting these perspectives here because political demands are always going to influence policy formation. But as serious students of the system, we have to look beyond pure politics and look to the science to find what actually works. So the absolutely crucial point is perfectly captured right here in the theory-data-policy triangle. This is a core concept. Policy must be based on a solid theoretical foundation. From there, data and research inform us whether that theory actually holds up in the real world. And finally, the evidence determines if the policy is actually doing what it was intended to do. Without all 3 points of this triangle interacting and informing each other, the entire system just collapses. Think about it. A policy implemented without theory or research to back it up isn't a smart strategy at all. It's literally just a blind guess. All right, Section 4. Why program fidelity matters. We're transitioning over to the implementation phase of the cycle now, highlighting exactly where most seemingly great policies completely break down in the real world. Program fidelity means implementing a policy exactly as it was originally designed, ensuring proper training, consistent application, and adequate resources. Consistency is absolutely vital here. If a policy isn't implemented consistently, scholars simply cannot replicate it or accurately test its effectiveness. If you start changing the underlying ingredients of the policy out in the field, you just cannot properly evaluate the final results. I want you to read this memorable quote from the source material because it perfectly captures the reality on the ground. We don't do X, Y, and Z, we do the diet version of it. We under-resource it and then complain the policy didn't work. I mean, this happens all the time. We set up a theoretically sound policy, but then we give it the diet treatment. We don't train the officers properly, or we try to rush way too many people through a program too quickly. Ultimately, stakeholders get incredibly frustrated and they just abandon the idea. But the policy failed not because the original idea was bad, it failed because it severely lacked program fidelity during implementation. And this brilliantly illustrates the critical difference between evaluating if we are simply doing the work versus evaluating if the work is actually effective. A process evaluation asks, is the policy progressing as planned and being implemented properly? Basically, that is checking our program fidelity. An outcome evaluation, on the other hand, asks, did the policy actually produce the intended change and solve the original problem? If we do an outcome evaluation and find out the policy failed, we have to first look at the process evaluation to see if we were even executing the policy correctly in the first place. Let's bring it all together in Section 5, Evidence-Based Solutions. Let's explore how we can use evidence to bypass those failed political experiments and start actually solving real problems. A great practical example of this in action is SAFE California, that stands for the Savings, Accountability, and Full Enforcement Act. You see, often policies aren't just driven by high-minded academic ideals, they're driven by cold, hard fiscal accountability. With a massively growing incarcerated population, states face intense financial pressure. Cost-saving measures like SAFE California really highlight how practical fiscal concerns frequently drive the demand for new, evidence-based policies that are both efficient and effective. Well, that raises the question, how do local jurisdictions know what actually works without wasting a ton of money testing things out? Well, they use resources like crimesolutions.gov. It's an incredible resource database of evaluated policies so practitioners don't have to constantly reinvent the wheel. It can be so disheartening to see local policies fail again and again. But this government resource serves as the ultimate cheat sheet. If a local police chief or a court administrator needs a solution, they can look right here to see exactly what data proves is effective. It saves time, it saves money, and it definitely saves a lot of frustration. Finally, Section 6, Key Themes and Questions. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that it gives you the exact blueprint to ace your exams by connecting theory, data, and policy. When you sit down to write your essays, ask yourself these three things. How does the evidence contradict public beliefs about crime? What underlying theory best explains the collected data? And how do we use this interaction to create better, scientifically backed policy? Master these three questions, and for sure, you will master the chapter. To wrap things up, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought. Look at a current policy right in your own community. Is it actually effective? And what is its theoretical foundation? I challenge you to take the theory-data-policy triangle out of the classroom and apply it to the real world around you. Don't just accept the rules at face value. Always question the evidence behind them. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Stay curious and keep learning.